Welcome to the Right Now podcast. I'm Anita, a teacher of 18 years, and I'm exploring what could be different in education at the moment if we come at it from a more human-centred lens. I've reached out to experts across Australia, people who have some of the highest hopes and clearest insights into where we might best place our attention at the moment. I'm incredibly excited to bring this conversation with Lael Stone to you today. Lael is an educator, TEDx speaker, author, and counsellor with over 23 years of experience. She's also the founder of Woodline Primary, an innovative school grounded in emotional wellbeing and connection. She hosts the popular Humans Being podcast and is author of the best-selling book, Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children, along with her latest book, Own Your Story. What I love about Lael's work is how she keeps bringing us back to a simple question. What is best for the humans here? Not to lower expectations, but because everything meaningful has to start there. She invites us to stay curious, to experiment, and to keep returning to what matters most. Lael, welcome to the Right Now podcast.
Thank you so much, Anita. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so incredibly excited to be able to speak to you today. I've come across your work recently in many different areas. I watched Seeing the Film. I loved it. Your book, Own Your Story, really touched me. Your podcast is amazing and your work through Woodline Primary School. And I'd love to start by asking, what inspires you to do this work and what is the deeper purpose that continues to drive you today?
I'll try and keep this like a succinct answer to this question because I feel it's a big one. I mean, I kind of ultimately often say that what drives my work is wanting adults to be able to understand the children in front of them and then understand the children within them. And I think I've always been a real humanitarian. I've always kind of looked at things in the world and gone, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this, and who's taking care of the babies and the children and our hearts and all those things. So I think as a deeply empathetic, sensitive human, I really do lean towards, how can we create change and how can we make this world a safer place for everybody? So I think over the 20 plus years of doing this work in many different forms, it's always for me come back to helping us understand ourselves better so that we can turn up better in the world, so we can be better partners, we can be better parents, we can be better educators. So for me, I think my great passion is around information and understanding and how we integrate all that. And I think, understand ourselves more so we can be the most authentic, amazing version of ourselves.
That is just beautiful, isn't it? Because how we show up affects how other people experience their life as well. I want to talk about your TED Talk. You spoke about how to raise emotionally intelligent children. Mm-hmm. You spoke about the rise in anxiety and depression and the need for greater emotional literacy. I think in schools there's a lot more awareness these days, but classrooms are increasingly complex and the conditions aren't always conducive to meeting kids' emotional needs in the moment. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, what are the non-negotiables for supporting our young people with this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anita, and there's a lot of complexity to it, and that's what I want to start with. I am so aware that I often talk about emotional awareness and listening to feelings and being present and connection and attunement and all these things. Yet if you are one adult with 26 kids, that is virtually impossible to do. And so I'm always very aware, especially when I'm talking to educators, that the theories I'm talking about or what I'm really standing for is very hard to often implement in our systems that don't have the infrastructure and the support for what we need. For me, and I guess this is just where I stand, I think in order to keep moving more towards emotional intelligence and emotional literacy, we have to look at the safety elements in the space. And I'm not talking, of course we need everyone to be physically safe. Everyone needs to have autonomy over their bodies, but I'm talking really about the emotional safety. And when we're talking about emotional safety, it's understanding that it's okay to be sad and it's okay to be angry and it's okay to be frustrated. And it's also okay to be happy and it's okay to be joyous. And yet our systems for a long time, particularly in education, have really built this foundation that children just must be good all the time and they must be compliant. And I don't know about you, when I'm told I have to do something or to be compliant, like there's a little part of me that pops up and goes, don't tell me what to do. And I'm going to push hard the other way. Now, there is many fabulous children out there that have a similar reaction to that. And then we also have a lot of kiddos that are carrying a lot of baggage, whether it's trauma, intergenerational trauma, whether there's some neurotypes, that affect how we are in groups and spaces, all those kind of things. There's so many different elements that play when it comes to children and to learning. So for me, I think one of the non-negotiables is having non-punitive environments. And it's one of the big things in the way I set up my school was that we didn't want to create spaces or environments where your name gets put on the board if you do something wrong, or that kind of shame profile of we need to make you feel worse in order for you to do better. And I really do come to stand in this place where I absolutely ultimately believe there is no such thing as a bad child. There's no such thing as a bad adult. There's just people that have got a lot of pain inside them. And kids are often responding to their environments. What's happening on the outside is usually a reflection of what's going on in the inside. And so when a child is having a hard time in a learning space, when a child is acting up, for me, the first question needs to be, I wonder what's going on for them. What's going on behind the behavior here? What do we know about this beautiful little human? Do we know that there's a new baby in their family and all of a sudden they're feeling misplaced and so they're feeling really powerless? So what they're doing is they're trying to find power in some way, and that power might be by being mean to some other child. Or do we know that this little person has a lot of trouble learning with certain ways, and what they need is quiet, or perhaps they need to be using their hands in order to learn something? I think the thing is we need to take a bigger picture, wider lens to look at all children and have a bit of an understanding that we don't all fit into one box. And I think, unfortunately, that's how our system often operates, because it's an old system and it's been around for a long time, and we all kind of know this, and it is absolutely doing the best job that it can, and there's absolutely a place for it. But I think we're at a time in history where we are seeing that on a lot of levels, children aren't thriving. We're not seeing educators thriving. And I think we're living in a completely different world to what it was set up to be, the many, many years ago when it was created. And so I think there is a real need for innovation now, and particularly within this innovation of how we learn and the environments and how we support educators, we then kind of get to come back to this foundational piece for me, which is children need to feel safe in order to learn. And children learn best when they feel safe, when they feel seen, when they feel connected, and when they know that they belong. And when we're not necessarily having that, it's very hard for children then to express how they feel. It then becomes trickier around the emotional intelligence and the emotional literacy. So I think it all belongs to one big melting pot of things that we need to address. And I don't think there's a Band-Aid, we just fix this one thing and then it's all okay. I think that many, many things lead into others. And, at the end of the day, I really do believe we need to often stand back and go, who is this child in front of me and how do we help them to thrive?
Gosh, you've touched on so many things that I want to explore further. Understanding our children, meeting them where they're at, the need for innovation, the need for a safe environment where they feel safe, connected, and a sense of belonging. Within schools, it's really important that we're creating space for kids to be where they're at in the moment. How do you see that happening?
Firstly, I come back to going, and I know that this is not always possible just because of, again, the infrastructure of our systems. When we have one adult and 25 kids, and maybe we do have a learning support officer in the room as well, or we have an extra aide, but there's still a lot of kids for two adults. And so I think it's very, very tricky when there's a lot of competing needs. And we know, and you would know as a teacher, it's usually the children that are the loudest that are the ones that are actually getting the attention. But there's a whole lot of other kids that may still be struggling, but they're learning to mask it, or they shut down, or they kind of repress what they're feeling. So it's tricky, I think, when we come back to going, how do we meet the needs of all the children? In an ideal world, we'd have smaller class sizes and we'd be able to connect more. I think also it's very much about slowing down our curriculum curriculum and all the needs and all the things that we say have to be done. When we can help children to feel safe by feeling seen and by knowing that we care about them and that we're deeply connected to them, when their nervous system is able to settle, that's when curiosity wakes up. That's when they have the time and the space to work through a problem. It's when they keep asking the questions, and why is it this way? And what does that look like? That I think we then begin to build those threads of safety and emotional awareness that we can then kind of start to move forward with it. I have so much compassion for educators. Like, I just think educators are just some of the most extraordinary humans in the world because of how they turn up, and sometimes in the environments they have to work in are very, very, very tricky. And then you often can cop a lot of judgment from parents sometimes who've got their own stories going on, and then trying to meet the needs of all these kids in front of you. It's not an easy job to do at all. In an ideal world, I would slow it all down, get more adults to be with more children. I would really kind of stand back and take a look at how do we support each child in their uniqueness. Now, we can't often do that when we've got to follow a curriculum and we've got different needs. But I think when we can open up ways of learning, the freedom for children to move in different ways in different spaces, then I think we can start to see some things shift and change.
I love the conversation about the importance of our nervous systems within schools. I'm grateful you spoke about class sizes because that is a huge factor, I believe. Slowing down, allowing for more curiosity. It's just so important. I'm interested to find out more about the school that you've co-founded, Woodline Primary. Wellbeing and learning go together. I wonder if you could take us back to the moment you decided to start this kind of school. What was the spark behind that decision?
Well, it actually wasn't anything that I ever thought that I would do. And it wasn't actually a deep desire of, I think I might create a school. That'll be fun. Actually, it came about because I was working really at the time as a therapist, just working with parents really around the struggles of their children. And one of my beautiful clients, she has 6 kids, 3 of her own 3-step kids. She would come each week and talk through this is happening and that's happening. And one of her children had started school and wasn't really doing great. Like, his name was being put on the board. He couldn't move his body when he wanted to. She's just like, he can't even eat when he wants to eat. And I was like, yep, that's pretty much our system. And we'd worked a lot together on kind of parenting and connection and attunement and listening to feelings and all that kind of stuff. And she said to me, well, what if we created a school that really brought in all those things that you've taught me? Because surely children would thrive if they feel safe and seen. And I was like, well, yeah, I do think they would. And, I have 3 adult children now, and I watch my 3 kids navigate the system with differing degrees of challenge just because of who they are. One was an athlete, like my son. I'm like, trying to get him to sit at a desk and learn was torturous. He's just like, he has to move his body. And so school for him was painful because he was just like, this is not how I learn. One of my other children was, deeply sensitive, highly attuned. And, she learns best by talking, by storytelling, by moving. Like, that's how she really understands learning. And again, that kind of didn't fit her and her system. And then I kind of joke, my 3rd child who came along is just like a disruptor. She was just like, this is wrong. Like, why are we doing this? And so she just pushed back right from the very beginning. And I was like, you're not wrong in your pushback, right? But this is kind of what we've got. So we've got to do it. So it hit me in the sense when Mel kind of proposed this to me, part of me really went, I wish I had this for my children. And if I wish I had that for my children, if I wish I'd had that for me, then I can pretty much presume that there's a lot of other parents that they wish would have a similar kind of thing. So, I knew nothing about building a school. Like, I'm not a educator in the sense of teaching children, but I've been teaching my whole life, lots of different things. So both Mel and I were not coming at it from that educational lens. I think we were coming to it from more of a trauma-informed, what is possible kind of lens. It took us 3 years from the beginning to when we opened the school. So it's very difficult to open a school. There's a lot that goes into it, and it costs a lot of money. And quite rightly, they want to make sure that the school's going to be able to work and, you're able to deliver on what you say you're going to do. So it's why it is very difficult to do it because there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. So over 3 years, we kind of pulled it all together to then open. We're in our 6th year now, and I kind of feel like only now in our 6th year are we really kind of hitting our straps. It's like any new business. It's really tricky. You don't know what you don't know. There's lots of challenges. You're still figuring it out as you go. And especially with schooling and when you're trying to do something a little bit different, it's really challenging. What really influenced me in doing the school, and for Mel as well, is I'd done a lot of exploration around Montessori education, around Steiner education. I was bringing my real trauma-informed lens to it as well. I'd worked a lot with families with trauma. I'd worked a lot with parents and kids and behaviour. So I was bringing that kind of lens, as well as, really big focus on play-based learning, looking through this space of when children feel safe, their ability to learn increases greatly. When they're interested in something, when they get to learn in a way that makes sense to them, when they get to move their body, when they feel like they need to, that makes a difference. When they get to eat, when they're hungry, just the kind of things that we really looked at with Woodline of what is going to help a child feel like they have their own autonomy and can learn in a way that makes sense to them. But how do we stay connected to them through this? This was really what drove kind of the vision and the thought behind it. We follow the Australian curriculum, that we still had to tick off the curriculum. We still have to abide by all the governing rules of what an independent school is. So we're doing all those things, but I think we had this beautiful opportunity to do it in a way different. If we didn't know how it was meant to be done, how would we do it? That's what I kept thinking about. And I think perhaps probably because both Mel and I hadn't worked in the system, we were like, well, what about this? And what about that? And our beautiful founding principal, I would go to her and I'd say, could we do this thing? And she'd be like, no, you can't do that. And she goes, but you could do this. And I was like, okay, that's an amazing idea. So we really, I think, spent the first few years trying a lot of things, seeing what worked, trying to really find our place within it. And especially around things like behaviour, being a non-punitive school, we're not keeping children in at recess for doing the wrong thing. We're not putting their names on the board. We're working with the reason why the behaviour is going on. So we were really having to spend a lot of time connecting, getting behind the story, meeting with parents, like really doing this whole wraparound approach for children. And then we were doing that with learning as well. And, so it hasn't necessarily been easy. I mean, it's been one of the most challenging things I've ever done in creating the school, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. If people want to open their own school, it's really intense. But I really do hold hope that what we are doing is kind of pointing in the right direction of what children need. We're also a no-tech school, so children don't learn on iPads or computers. We do have some tech in the older years, but that usually is just for research stuff. But, we use nature as much as possible. A bit of our philosophy is if we can do it outside, let's do it outside. We're lucky enough to be on 20 acres of beautiful farmland. So we have animals, we have gorgeous trees to climb. We have nature as our teacher, which is really, really beautiful. So I know that we're in a really amazing situation because we actually can draw on that as well. So there's many, many factors that, have grown and developed over the years of creating Woodline. But ultimately, I think for me, it always comes back to this, is that when we take off the pressure for children so they can be who they need to be, then that is often when they thrive. And part of our job is to get to know this child, to be attuned enough to them, to connect with them so we can support them in being able to be the best version of themselves. And then at the same time, we are doing this beautiful learning. So when you kind of say too, how do we do wellbeing and learning? I don't think you can do one without the other. Well, I just don't think you can. The wellbeing has to come first. I keep coming back to this. It's very hard for children to learn when their nervous systems are activated, when they think they're going to get in trouble all the time, or they've got a story that says I'm only good if I'm the best or getting the best grades. And I mean, I've worked with thousands of adults. I know that is the aftermath of us growing up in the education system and thinking we're only good enough if we're the best, or beautiful enough, or fast enough, or smart enough, or all the enoughness, right? So when we can take that pressure off, and we're saying to children, you are enough just because you're human. And also we're going to guide you about how to be a really healthy human. We're going to teach you healthy ways to move your anger. We're going to let you know that it is okay to cry when you're upset. We're also going to teach you ways to repair when things are not great with other kids. We're also going to teach you beautiful skills like reading and writing and numeracy and all those kind of things. But we want to do it in a way where there's fun, but we also want to do it in a way that it makes sense to you as to why I need to know this in the world. So, I think it is, for me, the well-being piece with the learning piece has to be one and the same. And, in a lot of what we look at Woodline, whether it's our philosophies or policies or anything, we always look at through that lens first.
I can't even imagine how much effort it was to start a school. Some of my friends and I, we sort of have joked over the years about, we should create our own school. And then I look at it and I think about it and I think, wow, like there is so much that goes into that. So it's amazing that you've taken this step, and what an incredible environment and opportunity you're offering these families and these young people. You name quite an uncomfortable truth that school doesn't really work particularly well for a lot of people. And I say that compassionately. As you say, so many people come out of school and they feel like it hasn't necessarily served them, or they haven't felt like their strengths were seen or valued within that school environment. And when I hear stories about that as an educator, it makes me feel really, really sad. I love that you're trying something different. And how can we foster kids' confidence and allow them to connect and allow them to see their strengths? You called it a little bit of an experiment. What has worked? What has been like, oh, that is gold?
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot that hasn't worked, and then there's been some good stuff that has worked. And I always, when I talk about Woodland, what I feel is really important to say is, like, we are not perfect. I don't think any school is perfect, and we are not the answer. We are one possibility for where education could go to. And I'm really clear with that. Like, I think that all children learn differently. There's some children that really love rote learning, and they're really good at school because they love taking in information, and they're excellent at that. And then there's other kids like my son who they learn best through their body, and that is how they retain information. And then we have other children that learn best through another child explaining it to them, or through using their hands. Like, I think there are many, many different options. And that's what I always want to say when I talk about schooling is, we're not the answer. We're just trying something different to see can this work and what is possible here. And I think it's really important to state that, because it hasn't been easy, because like many things, you bump up against something, oh, that doesn't work, how do we do it differently? And that was really, with any staff that came to work at our school, and even with our founding principal, part of the conversation was, we're going to mess it up. You got to be good with that. We've got to be okay with making mistakes. We've got to get better at repairing. We've got to get really good at going, we tried that, didn't work. What have we learned? How do we keep growing? And I think that is so important in education. How do we keep improving and doing it better? It's important in any aspect of life. I think the things that we've found have been really powerful. And I can't speak so much to the learning, because it's not so much my expertise on, the pedagogy and curriculum and stuff. That's why there's amazing educators at my school who do that. But from the place that I've stand in as the creator, and, sitting on the board and watching and really supporting the team, I think what we do really, really well is we lean into children when they're having a hard time. So there's no shaming. We're like, you're angry. Do you need to go and run? Do you need to go and snap some sticks? Do you need to yell really loudly? Like, we lean into being, feelings are not bad. And I think we do that really well. We talk a lot about feelings at our school. We talk a lot about that we have to be responsible for our feelings. So it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to project it onto somebody else. How can we use our words, or what do we need to do to help our bodies first? So I think we do that very, very well. I think maybe in our second or third year of the school, we had a new little girl that came to our school, and she got upset about something. And one of we call our teachers guides, one of our assistant guides, which is a support person, kind of came over and gave her a hug and said, you can cry, let it out. And she said, I was never allowed to cry at my other school. I'm so happy that I'm allowed to cry here. And she just had a big cry for 5 or 10 minutes, and then she was good. I think things like that make a difference, where I think what we're looking, or what we're holding for the school, is feelings are okay. And that's the same with the adults. You're allowed to get upset as well, right? And how we work with that. So I think that we do well. I think we give children choice and autonomy. So the basic things of, you can go to the toilet, when you want, that's just accessible. You don't have to wear shoes. You can learn sitting on the couch. You can learn sitting on the floor. There's times where we do need to come together as a group, and we need to listen, and, we're giving instruction, but a lot of the time there is the freedom and choice to learn in ways that make sense for you. And I think we do that really well. Even from simple things, we have grazing platters in our room every morning. I know it sounds like we're having cheese and wine and stuff like that. It's not that. It's like fruit and vegetables, but they're there every morning. I mean, we do this with little ones in kindergarten, and I'm like, why do we stop in school? Because kids don't often like to eat breakfast, or, so just, we want to make sure that they can have their basic needs met. They can eat when they need to eat. They can take their shoes off. They can sit on the couch if they want. There's those kind of things that I think we do really well. And I think what we do really well is we follow the child's interests. So one of the big things is, we've always fostered, what are you curious about? And so a child will go to a guide and say, I want to know how we could get frogs at our school. And this was a beautiful project that a little boy brought to his guide and said, I think we should have frogs at our school. And so our principal was like, amazing idea. well, how do we attract frogs? And so then she sent him off to do a whole research project on how we could create frogs, and then we needed to create a frog pond, and then we had this beautiful working bee with parents, and we created a frog pond, and the frog pond exists, and we do have frogs at our school now. And there's been many beautiful projects like that where some of the older kids, we want a tree house. Okay, amazing. Let's research what would it cost to build a tree house, what would we need, and the learning. We follow the learning. I remember turning up to school one day, and I was going to have a meeting with the principal, and there's this beautiful setup outside. And I was like, what's going on? And she said, oh, we're having a wedding. And I was like, who's getting married? And she's like, two of the teddies. And I was like, okay. And she said one of the younger classes, they were really interested about marriage. And one of our guides was a marriage celebrant. And she's like, well, let's have a wedding, what's involved in that. And then the children had to write the vows. They wrote invitations to everybody. There was so much literacy that went on with this. We've had funerals at the school as well, when the tadpoles had died, or when, one of the something, I can't remember who it was, died. And so the children then again, we had this whole experience of life. And I think that's what we do well. We follow where the children are curious and interested. And we often find then the children are deeply engaged because they want to learn, they want to know more. And so as long as we keep folding in all this beautiful stuff into from the curriculum into it, we are seeing they are learning in ways that it may not look as conventional as what we have mainstream schooling has told us, because we're not necessarily doing worksheets, but we are learning in the ways of what life is asking us. So I think we do that very well. We follow children's curiosity. We have these beautiful whole school projects and provocations that we have, where we do cross-age learning as well, where the kids come together in different ages and they discuss and talk about, what they're creating and working together. So I think we do that very well. I think really the overarching theme is always coming back to being a trauma-informed place. So being deeply attuned to what might be happening for a child and how do we support them to be the best version of themselves and what extras they may need within that. And I know a lot of schools often don't say this, but I feel like there's a lot of love in what we're doing, and I think that's really important. And when we set up the school, it was a really important thing that I want these kids to feel loved. Like, this is going to be an extension from home, right? Because they spend a lot of time here, and we want them to feel as safe here as they do hopefully at home. And so I think also too, part of that is bringing the community in. So really we've had to work over the years to really bring the parents and the community in and have them involved. I literally just saw today there's Harmony Day happening in our school today, and the principal just sent me these beautiful photos of this really, really long table they've set up. And we've invited families to bring foods that they love to cook, and everyone's going to come and eat together. And just that beautiful celebration of connection and who we are and deep acceptance. I think that's what we're trying to foster as well.
Gosh, that's just so beautiful. Choice and autonomy is so important for anyone, and I love that you're fostering that. You're giving young people some buy-in and they're really feeling connected and engaged. They're given the opportunity to be curious, and you're following where they lead with that, and you've still got accountability for them as well. I love the idea that they can eat when they want to, they can have a drink when they want to. That is something that it seems like it's so important, but it's not always valued within mainstream schooling.
Yeah.
If you were to take some of the things that you've found that have worked really well, and you can see how they could work really well just in any school, what would be some of the things that you would say, look, this is kind of like a non-negotiable for young people to support them with their well-being?
Well, I would say they need to play more. I would say that we need spaces throughout the day to just play, because, one of the other things that I know is really important is that children process life through play. And I think if we had spaces or time throughout the day where we could play and we can learn through our play, that could be really powerful. I think there's simple things that look, I know some schools do. We have quiet spaces for children to go. We have children that maybe it feels very loud. They can wear headphones and they can take care of their sensory needs. I think, again, what I would do is really bring in the conversations around feelings and how we can express them in healthy ways. Just even talking about that as a beginning place is a very good thing. The conversations around emotional literacy is a great starting place. Not always ideal, but I would really invite, that children can express when they're upset or they're angry, and that there's another adult there to be like, you're mad. What do you need to do? Let's go throw something. Let's go run. Let's go jump. Let's go rip up some paper. Like, what can we do to help your feelings move? I think that is really, really important as well. I also think sometimes, and I've spoken to educators about this. For me, playfulness is just one of the most beautiful ways to bring connection to children. But I think sometimes when we've got a lot of kids and one adult and we start to be a bit playful, and then the kids are like, it's on, and then it feels like it's out of control.
That's true.
Yeah. And so they're like, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
We've got to just keep it tight ship. And I get that. Like, I really get that. I think non-punitive practices work well when we have space and enough adults to hold for the children. But it's very hard to implement that when we don't have those other things. And that's why sometimes we have to use the punishments, or this is what we're doing in order to get that. And I think that is sometimes the trickiness, and for me, I guess, one thing that has been around for a long time has been talking about resilience in children, and we need to make them resilient and help them to take risks. But my big argument around that is, yes, that's really important, but we don't make it safe enough for them to take risks, because they try something and then we might tell them off for being naughty or too loud, or it has to look a certain way. And I think that is something I think we need to really reevaluate as well, is when we're talking about resilience, do we make it safe enough for kids to make mistakes? I mean, if I could change anything, I would just take away grades, really, up until about year 10. I would just get rid of grades at all. We can just track a child's learning, but no numbers, no grades, no this and that, you're this good or that good. We just track their growth to make sure that there is movement. But we take off any pressure for children to be a certain way that then becomes part of their identity. And I think if we did that, we could bring in more play. Because I think with more play, we learn, we take risks, we be vulnerable. Play is so powerful for learning a lot of these things. And, I appreciate the system that we're standing in. But if I could wave a magic wand, I would love to see it done a little bit differently.
I would love to see it done a little bit differently as well. And I'm so grateful you've brought up that conversation around grades, because from a very young age, a child, they can peg themselves against other people in the class. They know where they fit. I've got 3 children of my own. They come home and they know where they fit with maths, with English, with running, with art. And I remember that as a child. I remember an art piece going up on the wall and just thinking, when is that going to go down? Because that is so embarrassing. And it still is with me today. The teacher was doing nothing out of line, but then you get a grade attached to that at the end of the term, and that reinforces, I'm good enough. I'm not good at that. I am so interested about the conversation about grades and looking at their strengths and still tracking growth for each child without that. You talk about grades, achievements, other external measures. That's how our culture defines success. But you sort of talk about it around defining success around relationships, a regulated nervous system, and living in alignment with our values. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's only something I think that I've actually only really come to terms with in the last 10 or so years, because like everyone else, I've grown up in a similar environment to you where, our worth is indoctrinated into us. It starts with the grades, and then it becomes, do you get a high enough score to get into that university course? And then do you do well at a uni course? And then do you get the job that pays well? And then do you earn enough money to drive the fancy car? And then do you have enough money to get the big house? And then do you look good enough? Like in everything, we have these ideas of that success equals money and wealth and, high achievement. Yet I'm sure many people like I do that have all those things and they're deeply unhappy. They're not living their fulfilled life. Maybe they're doing that because that was the expectation put on them. Maybe they're ticking the boxes from those imprints from their parents to say, you're good enough if you become this. So I think we all have these often unconscious imprints around our worth because that's the society we've grown up in. I really passionately would love to just, rework that or give that a bit of a rebrand, because for me these days, and I think COVID really highlighted this, we all went through this big trauma and all of a sudden all our feelings and stuff was popping up, and it really made me think when I woke up in the morning, does my nervous system feel calm? And I'm like, if I feel calm, this is a good day. And it's like the measure of success completely dropped away, because I was like, am I all right in my body? That's kind of what I was looking at. And I think also as I've gotten older, I think you begin to realize that it's not about the house and the cars and the degrees and all that kind of stuff. It's about, what love do I have in my life? It's, what are the friendships surrounding me? Am I on purpose, and am I doing something good for the world? And am I raising my children with awareness and empathy and compassion? Because, who they're going to be is based on me. Like, for me, they're the success marks maybe that we want to look at. I mean, ultimately, I just come back to going, are we living our most authentic life? Because usually when we are living our authentic life, then we do have a sense of happiness. We have a sense of peace. We have a sense of enoughness within it when we're kind of aligned and living to our values and who we want to be in the world. And I just think we are at this really extraordinary time in history where enough people are talking about where we've come from and going, I don't know if that serves us anymore. I don't think that works. Like, a lot of the people that I work with, are all in therapy because we went through that system and we went, that didn't feel good. And my parents shut down my feelings. And, I don't feel like it's safe for me to leap or take a risk or be intimate, because all of it feels painful. And so I think we're at a time where we're like, well, that kind of maybe didn't work. Right. And so where are we now at this time in history? And I think with all the research that's out there and the studies that exist and the science, I come back to going, what helps a child to thrive? And I always come back to these kind of basics, which is safety, as I said, emotional safety, physical safety, knowing their non-punitive environments, their sense of belonging. Do they feel like they belong somewhere? Are they contributing to society? Do they feel like, who they are is a beautiful thing? They don't have to be any other way. Are we creating the right environments for them to thrive in those places as well? I mean, that's a really big thing. Are we putting kids in environments that don't serve that? And then the fourth piece, I think, of helping children to thrive is the reflection of the adults around them, so that our adults are owning our own stuff, where we're seeing where we project onto these kids, or we're being able to, track where our nervous system is. And I think when a child is lucky enough to kind of tap into all those points, that's often where we see children that thrive. And for me, that is success. I say this to my own 3 kids who are adults now. I just want you to live the most authentic version of your life. I don't care what you do for a job. Like, I just want you to wake up and go, oh, I feel so blessed to be here. And how amazing that I get to do this for work, or how amazing that, I get to go and follow my passions. I admire my son so much. He's 25. He's about to be 26. He's a mad rock climber, loves bouldering, rock climbing. Like, he would just live in the forest if he could. That is his passion. He loves it so much. He's so passionate about it. He's got a beautiful community around him. And he also works as a disability support worker. So he works with kids that have autism, mainly boys. And he has this beautiful balance of life. It's so different to what we grew up with, where you get your 9-to-5 job. He works his life around climbing and supporting these kids, and does it with such a beautiful balance that I'm like, I think you're onto something here, right? He works and gets paid really well, and then spends his time doing what he loves. He takes the kids with him to, do that kind of stuff. Like, I look and I think this next generation of kiddos are going to teach us a lot around what they will stand for and what they won't. And I do love that about them, although that can be challenging. But I love that about them, because I think they're really starting to go, your idea of success from ages ago actually isn't mine.
I 100% agree with that. There's a lot of conversations about generations and the people that are coming through are like this and that. But you're right. We have so much to learn from young people who are coming through. They're so much more flexible. They are walking into workplaces and being like, well, this doesn't work for me. This isn't how I want to do things. They do seem quite aware of what their values are. Values is such a huge one. I think as you get older, I feel like it becomes even more important what is important to me, and making decisions from there. That's definitely been life-changing for me. So I love your conversation around that. Another idea of yours that really resonates is, if we were to be able to truly see behind everyone's story, we might meet each other with deeper compassion. And I just love this. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Oh, for me, I think I've been really fortunate to listen to thousands of stories. So I started years and years and years ago, like 22 plus years ago, as a childbirth educator and as a doula. So I would be there when people were having their babies for the first time. And I had this really privileged opportunity to have an insight into people's lives because, you know, when you have a baby, all your fears come up. So people would talk a lot about that. I would spend a lot of time with them as a new family. We would unpack some of the big tricky things that had happened. I began to really understand trauma. Then that moved into parenting, and people would come to me and talk about, you know, I can't get my 3-year-old to get in the bath and I get really angry. And I'll be like, okay, well, there's tools for the 3-year-old, but let's talk about what makes you angry about that. And then we would unpack their stories around how they felt, you know, being 3 or what that was like for them. And I think over all the years, I've just listened to so many stories of people, and what I have seen is that everybody is just always coming from a place of protection. We are all trying to keep ourselves safe. And part of that is, I think, we all have pain, and we've all had traumas, big traumas, little traumas. We've all had times where we haven't got our needs met. We've all felt shame. We've all have this inbuilt protective part of it that says, I need to stay safe. Now, sometimes that I need to stay safe means don't put yourself out there. Sometimes that staying safe means don't be intimate with anyone or share anything. Sometimes staying safe means I need to control everything in my environment because that's the only way I feel safe, that I have an element of control. And I think in listening to people's stories, what I really began to see was just that we're all actually the same. We've all got this pain, and we're all just trying to keep ourselves safe. We're all coming from protection. And, you know, I joke sometimes, we're all kind of adults. We're like little 5-year-olds walking around in adult bodies, bumping into each other, because a lot of the time it's the wounded parts of us, it's the inner child in us that's actually calling the shots of what happens in life. And that's why I guess I say that if we met someone and we could like look behind them and see their whole story, we wouldn't judge for their need to control, and we wouldn't judge perhaps the way they are, because we'd be like, that makes sense as to the why you are the way you are, because you're just trying to keep yourself safe, or that was your trauma, or that was your experience, or that's what happened to you. And I guess having listened to so many people and doing this work for a long time, what it's really taught me is about compassion. It's about compassion for the human experience. And I know we have pain, and I know people can do some really painful things to others, but I really do see that often it just comes from their own pain and hurt. You know, hurt people, they do. And it's the same with children. No child feels good hitting another child. No child feels good being mean to someone else. They're usually doing it because they feel powerless, because they feel frustrated, because they've got their own big backpack full of feelings. And I think as a society and a culture, we have been raised to be judgmental. We've been raised to, it's everyone else's fault. You need to do it this way so it'll be better. Like that is usually kind of the imprint that most of us have. And I guess I feel passionate about helping people to think a bit deeper and undo that a little bit more, to go, but actually let's look behind this story here. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable. We need to. It also doesn't mean we don't have boundaries. Boundaries are so important. But I think the fundamental piece of understanding that, you know, we are all trying to do the best we can with the stories that we carry forward. And for me, I don't know, I just try to every day look through that lens towards people. You know, I try to just understand, be compassionate, and be curious as to what has gone on in their world that makes them be like that, you know, and then understand it and meet it in that way.
It's so true. Everyone is just doing the absolute best they can. I find in school sometimes, you know, everything's quite heightened because people have really high expectations, but they care so much. And sometimes it can feel a tiny little bit transactional in the way that things happen. And so I love that lens of coming to it with compassion. Everyone's doing the best that they can. But as you say, boundaries are so important. It doesn't mean that you don't have expectations or difficult conversations. This is a big question, but in an ideal world, how would you like to see education evolve over the next 5-10 years to support young people, educators and families?
Oof, it is a big question. Look, many places. I mean, the first place is I would like to support the educators first, because I think we are asking them to hold 25 little people's nervous systems. That's massive. And then you have to teach them as well, right? So firstly, I would be like, what can we do to support educators more? So I'm like smaller classes, more adults in the room, helping adults understand their own nervous system. So even really supporting the teachers and educators to be able to help their bodies, help themselves, stay grounded, understand the emotional awareness, children's feelings, trauma, all that kind of stuff. Like I feel firstly, if we could support educators to understand that piece, especially around trauma, that could make a massive difference in how they respond to their kids, but also understanding their own stories and trauma and imprint, right? Because we often get reactive or react when our system's fired up. So firstly, I would just love to wrap around all educators and just give them the biggest hug firstly, but then also like, how do we support you? How do we support the infrastructure of the system? Like if we had unlimited money from the government, I'd be like, right, let's pull this back and look at how do we bring support to the places that need it first, right? Which would be the adults that are holding the children. So that would be the first thing. I would bring in more play. I would create more spaces for play. I would take out quarter, maybe even half of what's in the curriculum to create more space for play, for kids to dive deeper in their explorations and their curiosities, even play into the secondary years. Like it saddens me that we get rid of stuff for teenagers to play with. Like teenagers need to play as well. I always go, we need to put Lego out for the teenagers to play at recess, and we need monkey bars, and we need things for teenagers to move their bodies and play and be curious about as well. So more play for everybody. I would also, and I know this is a massive ask, but I would love to be able to hold the parents more, because I guess what I've seen over the years too, and you know, I've noticed this at Woodline, is that a lot of adults have their own school trauma, and then their kiddos start school, and then if their child touches on a theme that's very similar to what happened to them, whether that's being excluded or bullying or trouble learning, it can activate a lot in the adult. And then the adult kind of comes in hot sometimes. And, you know, that can feel very, very challenging for a school system, you know, when we're just trying to help our kids as well. And I think helping the adults understand what's theirs, what they can do to connect with their kids, you know, and I know parenting, you know, it's something I've talked about for a long time, but parenting, you know, is massive as well, what we're holding these days as a parent. And I think as an overarching thing, the more connection we can have with children, so at home and at school, the best we're going to get out of these kids. So the more safety we bring at home, so, you know, adults being aware, adults being able to regulate their nervous systems, adults being able to be aware of what's their stuff, so we're not projecting onto kids. If we can do that work at home, then the school can also support the children in that way. And I reckon we would see massive changes. And I also think, you know, the big systems, and we see this with neurodivergent kids now, you know, a lot of the way the system has been doesn't serve them. And, you know, I'm not an expert on that at all, but I think there are some amazing experts out there that could add so much rich conversation to what we could do to really support these children to learn as well. And I think these beautiful kids hold such an important place, because they're kind of saying, this isn't really working for me. And then what we try and do is we try and squeeze these kids in harder and go, you just need to try harder. And I'm like, actually, I think we need to shift the environment a little bit more. You know, so that they're the kind of bigger picture things, which I know are not easy to just implement, you know, and I really get this. It's a big ship to turn, you know, it's been traveling this one way for a long time and it's really hard. And I guess my hope for Woodline and what we do there is that we can be an example of what is possible. And we're not the only ones. There's some amazing schools out there doing some incredible things. But I kind of hope that we can get enough research and data to see what works, keep trying it. You know, I'm a big fan of just give it a go. Let's see what happens. You know, it takes courage to be innovative, but I really think that that's where we start to see change, when we're brave enough to try something, give it a go, see what works, see what doesn't. I think that's where we will start to see the needle move a little bit.
Wow, you touch on so many things, really uncomfortable truths around education and, you know, the possibilities that things can be different. It is possible. As you say, it's going to take a lot to turn this ship around, but it's so important. Like it is, I don't know, something has to happen, something has to change. And a lot of those things that you've touched on, I think, are places that we could start. And change is possible if we can start having these conversations. So I'm just so incredibly grateful for your wisdom, your insight, your expertise, your knowledge. in so many different areas. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Anita. And I really just want to acknowledge, it is a tricky conversation to have because, and I really don't believe in making anyone wrong for
No.
it. I think it's important that we just go, what works and what doesn't, and what are we seeing, and where are people getting their needs met and where are they not? And they are uncomfortable conversations. They're uncomfortable conversations in education. They're the same in parenting. Like, they're uncomfortable. But I don't think that we can just keep band-aiding anymore, because I think we are at a time where change is really important, because the children are reflecting back to us, it's not working. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing rise in mental health issues in kiddos. We're seeing a lot of children that don't want to go to school at all. And I think, it's time that we have these conversations, that we be brave, that we lean in, we take a look at it all and go, what can we do? But not from a place of wrong, but from a place of compassion, and go, what could be possible and how could we support a system to do that? And that's what I really want to take a stand for is, I don't think there's one quick fix. And I think that we just need to keep having this conversation. And that's why I love what you're doing with your podcast, because I think we can keep having these conversations. That's how we can kind of create change.
Oh, absolutely. We can create change. And thank you for naming so many truths so compassionately, because as you say, it's not wrong. We don't need to be as polarised as we are around education. It is uncomfortable at times, but we have to start somewhere, because our kids, they need us to be showing up for them. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I love the compassion and care that Lael brings to conversations about education. Also, her willingness to name some really uncomfortable truths that we are experiencing at the moment. If there were 3 things I would take away from this conversation, the first would be her invitation for us to redefine what is the meaning of success for every young person in our system at the moment. Secondly, we need to be looking at the nervous systems of people within schools and the reality of supporting young people and the adults who are holding them. And thirdly, we don't need to be so polarised, point fingers, lay blame. It is really important that we're showing up with curiosity and experimenting and wondering how things could be different. It's a collective responsibility that we have to look after the people within our system. If you love this conversation, please share it with someone who might enjoy it too. If there's one thing I'm learning, it's this. These conversations matter, and they're even more powerful when we're having them together.